are so excited to have you guys come. This has been such a delightful project for me to work on. Many of you guys might not know this, but I have to leave. I'm taking a break from school. I'm a senior here at BYU Hawaii. And before I left, I had this wonderful opportunity of meeting Roger and being able to help plan this conference with my daughter over there, and it has been just the most wonderful experience. And so I'm so grateful that you guys came here, took time out of your day. For all of those who have come to Laie, who are coming into our home and our space, we would just say thank you for coming here, and I hope that you feel the love that we have for each other, for life and humanity. We especially want to thank each one of these presenters. They have taken so many hours of their day and their time to be able to present some quality information about our Abrahamic religions and how we tie together and bond together. Really, I'm from the Intercultural Peace Building Program, and this is what it is all about, is us coming together and with different worlds views and to be able to find our common humanity. And so I'm just so appreciative of you guys coming here and joining us and participating. I hope that you all go away with some desire to meet someone different than you, some understanding of your own religion, perhaps your own story, because when we understand our own history, it's easier for us to go forward. We want to particularly, we're just a few house rules. There's snacks over there. Please help yourself to eat them anytime. Don't ask, just go over and eat them. Keeps you awake. Not that you're going to be bored. These guys are amazing. And they're out the door, and just to the right is bathrooms if you need bathrooms, and we have garbages here. You'll notice that there is a few people with lays like this and name tags. Those are our amazing field directors and volunteers, and they will help you. Any questions, anytime, they will help you. If you haven't signed in, please sign in, because we want to get like-minded people who really appreciate the space and the interfaith space. We want to be able to collaborate with students and other organizations. And before we start our program, we want to recognize the fact that we are on traditional Hawaiian land, that this is sacred land, and this land doesn't belong really to anyone. It belongs truly to the Hawaiian people, and we are so grateful that our school could be built upon this land and that we are able to learn and grow so beautifully in this space. And we'd like to invite our Hawaiian faculty and students to come up and give us a welcome.
Amen. No leila, e kia nai na hano e nung mei nei, e ho'oloha I kia papa, na kanaka na awao, pili ka ho'omana o kākou, ke ho kipa nei mākou, ke kahi o na kanaka o ka aina, kia aina aloha hoi nei, ia o kou paka ia pau, e mo marihini no manei, ka ke ho kipa ia nei, lilo hoi o kou e ohana ia mākou nei. No leila, ke noho nei kākou I loko ka manuhia o ko kākou a kua o kai. Nāna I kukulu, hana nā mea apau I loko kia honua a mākou. E mākou ma Hawaii, e aina, I o lelo mua I ai, no ko mākou po I kupuna. Lawe I ai e kia kua, a haawi ia mai kia aina no mākou, no na hanao nā pauloa I loko ka pono. Ano leila, I ke ia wā, ke noho marihini nei mākou aina I o lero mua I ai. He ano ke. A kā, ke mana o lana nei mākou, I ka wā kupono, e hoi I ai, a aina ia mākou, a ia mākou I ka aina I ho kai mākou. Ano leila, ke ho o meikai aku nei mākou ia o kou a pau, maka hai o lero ana, a ia o kou, maka ho o loa ana ia mākou. Ke hai aku ni au I ki imu mea makaino o ko mākou o ola o Yesu Christo. Amen.
Thank you so much for giving us that welcome, and thank you for letting us study here in this beautiful land. We particularly love the fact that we're able to hold this type of conference here at BYU that is full of so many students from all around the world, and each one of those students from their countries and their cultures, they view the world differently. And so that's one of the beautiful things about BYU Hawaii is that we're able to come here and realize that our worldview isn't necessarily the only worldview. And so with that in mind, we'd like to invite David Whippy to come up. He's the director of the Intercultural Peace Building Program who's sponsoring this event, and we would like him to come up and give us a few words of welcome. And just before he does that, I just truly hope that you guys know that we appreciate you being here and that you are important and valuable to our community, to this island, and to the world in general. Each one of you guys has something that you can give to the world, and it is my desire that this conference will help you be able to find ways that you can be part of building peace wherever you go. David Whippy.
I've been asked to pull the mic up and lock it in this. Okay. Does that work? Hold on, technical difficulties. Sorry. All right, brothers and sisters, aloha. I think it's only proper for our event to also say shalom and assalamu alaikum. I first want to acknowledge and thank our Hawaiian Studies program, our students and our faculty for helping us start this program in the proper cultural way. The Oli, Pule, and the traditional speech pays respect to the Kanaka Maoli, the first peoples on the land, but also reminds us of Laie being a pohuhonua, or a place of refuge throughout its history. People have sought this place, people continue to seek this place, people have been healed here, people are continuing to be healed here. I'm going to be brief because I know we want to get to our panelists. As director of the McKay Center, I would like to formally welcome you all to this interfaith academic panel. I want to specifically welcome our panelists, And friends and family who may be on our campus for the first time, welcome to BYU Hawaii. We hope that you feel the spirit of this place, as Naomi said, and that during your time with us today. We also want to welcome our faculty, from our departments and centers on campus, and also, last but not least, to our students. Welcome. I want to acknowledge and thank our university president, President Kawe, our academic vice president, Isaiah Walker, our faculty dean, Aloalani Hausman, and the Hawaii office of the LDS North America West, who have guided and supported our McKay Center team in planning this event. The McKay Center's purpose is built on the foundation of David O. McKay, a previous president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He stated that from this school will go men and women whose influence will be felt for good towards the establishment of peace internationally. Interfaith panels like this one today speak to this vision. In the spirit of brotherly kindness, human dignity, and unity, I pray that we all enjoy today's event. Mahalo, thank you.
Thank you, David. We're sure lucky to have you as the director of the Intercultural Peace Building Program. We'd now like to turn the time over to Roger, who is the driver of this conference. I had the privilege of meeting him over in February at another conference, a World Peace Religion Conference, and I noticed him right away, and I thought, I want to meet that guy. And then after the conference, he was chatting with someone, and I didn't get a chance to meet him. And then he looked over and he saw me and he walked right to me, and I thought, oh, he got the same vibe. He wanted to meet me too. So I put my hand out, I chatted with him, found out about the wonderful work he was doing. We had this great conversation, great connection. And then he admitted that he actually just came over to get his shoes that were right beside me. but it was...
He was standing on.
Yeah, I was standing on his shoes, but he could have left that part out. But anyways, I'd like to turn the time over to him.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and thank you for being so wonderful. I'm just so overwhelmed at the great job that Naomi and Talia and all the people here have done. It's really terrific. This is a subject that is so really close to my heart, and also something that I'm planning to do for literally the rest of my life. I got involved with interfaith matters back in 1975. I don't know if everybody in the room was born in 1975, but I call myself the only Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Taoist, Sufi tax lawyer in Hawaii, maybe in the world. So I've managed to walk in a couple of worlds, and I really believe, I also was, for any of you know, Joseph Campbell was a great mythologist, did a project with Bill Moyers called The Power of Myth, and treats religions and other cultural stories as stories to help us understand how to live better. And so Joseph Campbell was married to an Erdman and lived here in Hawaii, and I set up a foundation for them and was on the board for many years. So I'm seeing interfaith work through religion and academics. And terrific to be here today, because what I really believe is the knowledge that these presenters have handed down to the students here and many other youth is so important. Although they have the knowledge at this point in their lives, they're really not putting it into practice. So I've talked to David a little bit, and we're going to, after the program, we're going to try to get together with Kupuna and students both here and other schools and really work on some programs so that the students can find meaningful ways to work with this knowledge. So let me introduce everyone else in the program. I think you're going to be really amazed at the close connection between these religions. One of the things that got us started on this program was the idea that most people don't even know the history of their own religion, much less have time or inclination to learn about the history of others' religions. But when we started working on this program and others that I have done in the last few years, I'm just amazed at how connected they are. And I think all of you are going to find some things here today that you didn't know, how Judaism connects with Islam, how the Christian religion evolved from Judaism, and the times and the history that made all these things so important. So our panel today are both knowledgeable in religion, but I don't want to say principally, but additionally, they're really experts in the history of our religions. And I want to introduce you to them today. And let me just say, before I do that, I want to just make a statement, list the organizations that are sponsors and supporters here today, in part so that you'll know how many organizations are out there in Hawaii doing interfaith work. So BYU Hawaii, of course, has been a leader and really wonderful to make this space available. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community of Hawaii that Imam Matiullah represents. Temple Emmanuel, where I have been a member. Sof Marav congregation, where Greg Kinkley is the cantor there. The Baha'i community, the All Believers Network, the Maitreya Institute, which is a Tibetan Buddhist organization that presents programs on art healing and spirituality in all cultures, and the Interfaith Ohana of Hawaii, of which Tom and Cynthia Lynch are here today with us. So, Greg Kinkley, cantor at Sof Marav, the Jewish religion. Imam Matiullah Joyia from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Professor Becky Strain of BYU Hawaii and the Christian community. And Reverend Mike Young, who is a Unitarian minister for many years. And I'm just going to turn it over to them now. We're going to start with the basics, which really starts with Abraham and the foundations of our three religions. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the first thing you should notice, I think it's very clear, and it's why we're sitting up here today, is that we all seem to be getting along, because we're not... we all seem to be getting along? Although there's some guy at the end of the table that's telling me what to do with the microphone. Thank you, Reverend Mike. But the first takeaway that I think is valuable, you should always observe, is that clearly non-Christian religions force you to wear funny hats. So I think that's the first takeaway if you're taking that. So one thing that unites us is we all have a relation with Abraham, or Avraham, as we Jews call him. So we thought it might be meet to begin with explaining what Abraham means to me, besides the president. Abraham is to the Jews the quintessential father. He's the beginning of the whole tribe. That's why he's up there, and he also has his Islamic name Ibrahim, right? In which Mati will explain. So we invoke his name as a conduit for our prayers. When we pray every day and ask God for all the things we have to ask him for, I won't go into detail on that, that's too much information. We need to invoke the name of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because we figure, well, God, remember those guys you really liked, like Abraham, how cool he was? Well, I'm related to him, so you really should listen to my prayer too. So he's a conduit for us also. But perhaps most importantly, in terms of what's going on today, is that Abraham had this very special relationship with God. He was really ahead of his time, certainly ahead of Judaism. He wasn't a Jew. This is all pre-Jewish. He ascribed to certain basic moral laws or tenets that I think we all share. Some are on the divine level, some are on the human level, and some are on the, I'd say, property level. So on the divine level, he believed that there's one God, and because of that, that God is owed a certain amount of respect and obeisance. On the human level, that we shouldn't take a human life, we shouldn't murder, and that the conjugal relations and everything having to do with sexual relations has to be put in a certain order to protect the family, which is the valid and most beautiful expression of humanity. And then on the property level, with our animals, we shouldn't kill them unnecessarily or create undue pain, and that we shouldn't steal. So there are 6 tenets there, and a 7th one is that we should devise some rule of secular justice in order to preserve these maxims. So as you're listening to what our other fine representatives have to say about Abraham, just keep those in mind, because I think that definitely is the takeaway for the Jews.
You can have your time.
Yes, absolutely. And my mic.
Okay. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum and aloha, everyone. Aloha. Thank you very much for having me. I am honored and humbled to be here. And it's been nothing but a wonderful experience, not only joining you right now, but also meeting Roger, Greg, Becky, and Mike over the last few weeks in preparation for this program. So thank you once again, BYU, Naomi, everybody who helped organize this entire event. When it comes to the relation of Prophet Abraham with Islam, 2 overwhelming themes that I would share with you from the Holy Quran, which is the Islamic holy book, are his commitment to the Creator, Lord Allah, or God. He was a monotheist, so there are about 12 times there is reference of him being Hanif. Hanif is a term which means someone who is ever inclined to God only. He is also a symbol of sacrifice. His willingness and unwavering devotion to God, and in his willingness to sacrifice something that he loved the most at such an old age, that he was willing to sacrifice his only son. So these are 2 things that I think he should be highlighted. Aside from that, the impact of Prophet Abraham on Islamic faith is overwhelming. He's mentioned 69 times in the Holy Quran. There's an entire chapter named after Prophet Abraham, chapter number 14. There are verses in the Quran where Prophet Abraham is called your father. So, Millata Abikum Ibrahim, follow the religion of your father Abraham. At another place, God the Almighty states that Ittabi Millata Ibrahim, that you should follow the religion of Abraham. At another place, there are so many other references that I can think of. It says, Kad khalat uswatun hasanatun fi Ibrahim. Certainly there is an excellent model for you to follow in Abraham. So as you can see, Prophet Abraham is a central figure in Islam as well. So much so that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would start his prayer with a prayer that Prophet Abraham offered, that is recorded in the Quran. Then he would end his prayer with the prayer of Prophet Abraham, and in between as well, there is an invocation which we call it Durud Ibrahimi, the invocation, the Abrahamic invocation, which the translation is, O Allah, bless Muhammad and his people as you blessed Abraham and his people. So aside from that, you can see the Hajj. You may have heard the Hajj, the Muslim pilgrimage. It was, according to our belief, and it's mentioned in the Holy Quran, it was initiated by Prophet Abraham in Mecca. One of the 2 greatest holidays that we celebrate as a Muslim, the festivals, is Eid al-Adha, is also in commemoration of his sacrifice and his willingness to sacrifice his only son. So these are, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, that Abraham belongs to us, right? We own it. And this is something that I'm sure you may feel from a Jewish point of view, or you may feel from a Christian point of view. And I believe this is the beauty of Prophet Abraham that we are here to cherish. Thank you.
Amen.
So pull it close. Yes. I'm not going to use my angry mom voice. With that note, as they're both speaking and throughout all of our meetings together, one word keeps coming back to me over and over again, and that's the word family. In Latter-day Saint tradition, and I think a lot of Christianity, we use the term father of many nations for Abraham and see him as a father of many tribes. And it's been very fun to work with these brothers. And one of our first meetings, one of them asked, well, why do they call you Sister Strain? And it's this idea of family. And as a united family of Abraham, we are all truly brothers and sisters. So, from a Christian perspective, from my Christian perspective, definitely family dominates as a very important concept with Abraham, especially when we bring in the concept of gathering of Israel. Israel is the descendancy of Abraham, and we are gathering that family back together as we've been scattered throughout the world. And, it's things like this that are part of gathering. So for me, Abraham, big family, we're having a reunion, brothers and sisters. And I think Mike's probably going to go a little more academic and smart than me, so turn it over to you.
Thank you. My tradition is peculiar in that I was raised a Baptist, tried for heresy, and thrown out. I was declared a stranger. The deepest piece of the Abrahamic tradition for me is the experience that almost anyone who traveled at all in Abraham's day knew perfectly well that they could break a leg, run out of food, be robbed. So whenever they would come into a village, a city, a town, there was a basic tradition that says you are responsible for the stranger within your gates. That means that no one is ultimately a stranger. And that has, of all of the various changes in ethics and family and morality that we have gone through, we keep coming back to the necessity of realizing that within our gates, no one is a stranger. That's core to my tradition, my Unitarian Universalist tradition. You will see us arguing for radical religious freedom and radical personal freedom within the limits of being responsible citizens. That's core for us. And for me, it goes all the way back to that experience in the desert, where one can never be sure that they won't be the person that needs to be treated as a member of the community when they wander into somebody else's territory. I'll try to stay out of your territory, but if I wander in, treat me not as a stranger.
Thank you. Thank you all. Let's really absorb that, because I don't think all of us understood, particularly perhaps from the Islamic tradition, how fundamental Abraham is to our three traditions. But if you look up here, and Greg mentioned it, Abraham is above the beginning of the religions. So the next section, we're going to get into this detail below Abraham, the Jewish tradition, which leads to Christianity, and the Muslim tradition that comes down from Abraham. We're going to be tracing that and following that. But just keep in mind what has been said here. We all are going back to Abraham, to his principles. Monotheism, the principles of helping your neighbor, the principles of justice, the principles of many of our traditions that many of us may have seemed only relevant to our traditions. But this is really what we want to make clear, that the basics, the fundamentals of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all go back to the exact beginnings, starting with Abraham. So, Greg, now will you start us down this next line, this next part of the Jewish experience and we're talking here 4,000 years ago. So Abraham, we've got a date of roughly 1820 BCE. So 2,000 years since Christ and another 1,800 years before that. Actually, all the students here, they're going to get 4,000 years of history in a couple of hours. Maybe they should get, that would be like 4 semesters, right? So you should get 12 hours of credit. And then you could graduate from college in a week. Okay, I'm turning over to Greg to go through the Jewish part.
Thank you. So the essential document of Judaism is the Torah. And luckily I brought it right here. Here it is. The way we read it every Shabbat, it's, first of all, you'd notice, well, the plastic part's sort of a modern thing. But basically it's a scroll, and it has the, what you folks would probably call the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Nomenclature makes me shudder occasionally, but you get the idea. So this is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's sort of a Levitical sandwich. Okay, you've got Genesis and Exodus that tell a story full of interesting characters, bad actors in a dysfunctional family. Then in the middle you have this really, I'm sorry, I'm just going to tell them this rather boring part that goes through everything that the high priest and the Levites have to do, basically running archaic McDonald's. It's sort of a barbecue the whole time, right? It's, imagine the cleanup in the temple at the end of the day, right? And then as a palliative, sort of a, a palate refresher, 2 more books full of stories, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy is sort of Moses in his old age, sort of forgetting, so he kind of repeats everything again. We all do that. So Genesis is basically the story of how we got up to Moses and the Promised Land. Exodus is the story of Moses in the Promised Land and how we received this, the Torah, again, without the plastic and the rules. Then Numbers is us getting from Egypt, that's another story, into the Promised Land to start to execute on this document. And then Deuteronomy is where Moses is reminding the Jews of what they have to do because he knows he's about to exit stage left and he won't even be able to see the Promised Land. And in the middle is all this Levitical Kohanim sort of thing about sacrificing sheep, goats, you name it. So that suggests strongly, and I think it's not inaccurate, that Judaism can be looked upon in 2 levels. There's the story part, the who we are, and then there's the action part, which is what we do. So on the who we are, the first part, Genesis, does that, the laser thing,
Yes.
how do we make that
Just
work?
press this.
Just press that? Okay, I'm gonna unceremoniously get up here. Oh, this is great, I love it. Glad there are no airplanes going by here. Okay, I hope you can hear me. So here we have Abraham at the top. And then he had, yes, 2 sons. He had Isaac, but before Isaac, he had Ishmael. Because he had 2 different wives. He had Hagar, as we call her, and also Sarah. Okay, so this sets a trend, which is something that Judaism is riddled with. Nothing simple, everything's at least in pairs, or there's some sort of dichotomy, the holy and the unholy, the correct, etc. Here, God, at least according to the Jews, told us that the line of Judaism is going to go through Sarah and Isaac. So these are the 3 patriarchs we always invoke when we're doing our morning prayers. In the name of Abraham and Isaac and of Jacob. We say Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I want to say here very clearly, there's not a Jew who was a serious study of Torah that doesn't believe that it's also the God of Ishmael. So let's make that clear. It's just that this is a family story, and there's look at all these guys. We don't have time to do all of these, right? So we're just going on the Jewish part. But it's not like this is all so confederated and very easily parsed, right? Every time there's a major player like Isaac, something goes wrong, right? There's something that goes off to the side. So with Abraham, through Sarah and Hagar, he has at least 2 sons. You have Isaac and Ishmael, and then Ishmael becomes the progenitor of the Arabs. And I'm sure Mati can put a little more fine-tuning on that. Then with Isaac, we have Jacob and Esav. We call him Esav, but Esau, right? So Jacob and Esau, there was this big dispute about who was born first, right? Jews are always arguing about something, right? So, and you know the story about the lentil soup and all of that, but see, Esau sort of gave up his birthright, and we say that he's the progenitor of the Edomites, which among others, conveniently for us in our tortured history, we say are also the Romans came from the Edomites. It's sort of a kick to the side for us. But, it's politics, not religion, right? Then Jacob he was quite prolific. He had 12 sons, right? And some daughters too, at least one, Dinah, who we know about. So we have Levi, and we also have Judah. So here yet is another bifurcation. We have Levi, who became the progenitor for the priestly class, which comes down conveniently to Moses, who actually had a little part-time in a river, but we won't get into that either. And then Judah, who had his ups and downs, but finally, actually, David was in the line for Judah, and I'm told even some other well-intentioned Jews, perhaps down here. So you see, this is a very, very involved family tree that is marked by branchings all the time, branchings off, and you're always taking the focus of the Torah is on following one branch of this. So that's the who we are part. Thank you, that was very helpful. On the what we do, well, that gets into a big mess, because it's all about the temple and all these very stringent laws about what you do when you've committed different kinds of sins, what animals need to be brought, how they're slaughtered, and although the Torah treats it very specifically enough that the Kohanim, the priests, knew what they were doing, there's an inherent weakness in this whole theory, which is, again, sorry for the horrible allusion to McDonald's, but McDonald's is a franchise. You can find, I passed a McDonald's on the way here. That's how I knew how to get here. There's only one temple. You can't have another temple. As a matter of fact, the Samaritans started their own temple, and they got into a bunch of trouble. They were heretics. The Torah is very clear. There is only one temple. It's in Jerusalem, and that's where Hashem, as it were, has his presence. Which, of course, is a little disturbing, too, since one of our major tenets is that God is everywhere. But just roll with me here. He's in Jerusalem, and he wants it there. So this is a setup for something we'll talk about later about, do you really want to sink all your capital in a religion that is, locked into one piece of real estate? It's really, especially when you're in the Fertile Crescent, right? Everyone's passing through there. The Egyptians, the Assyrians, there are all these people coming through. We never even put out a welcome mat, right? Because we didn't want to encourage anyone to come through. And we never really had much of a standing army either, because we were too busy burning all these animals. So this is what Torah Judaism is, basically. It's temple cult Judaism. You have this bunch of people who are all related genetically to Levi, who are accepting animals from every part of Israel in an economic system that seems, from modern standards, to be absolutely unsustainable. And perhaps it is, because even if you're up in the Golan Heights, you've got to bring your goat down Jerusalem. Heaven forfend that you actually decide to execute him there. That would not do. That's a great sin. So it's not like they had rapid transit back then, right? So this is an inherent problem with Judaism as long as we're following the Torah. And again, God keeps impressing on us that we have to follow the Torah because, after all, it is our sacred document. It's what defines us as Jews. So up through there were two major crises, I guess I'd say, with the temple. In 586 BCE, which was quite a long time ago, long before my time, those Assyrians, which I mentioned before, butted in, and they sacked the temple, and as Assyrians will do, and the Babylonians, they decided the way to make sure we maintain suzerainty here is we're going to take everyone out and put them in our country. So all these Jews are plopped down into Babylonia. When the Romans came in 70 CE and blasted the temple again, they did the typical Roman thing. The Romans are republicans, right? They know exactly how to handle things. We're going to keep the people there. They know how to handle things. We'll just control the people who are there. So two very different ways of imposing control with two very different results. Because the Assyrians had taken all the Jews out and put them in Babylonia, we prospered in Babylonia. We started writing things. And then when Cyrus let us go back in, big mistake for him, by the way, we were ready to start the temple over again. If they'd kept us in situ the whole time and crushed the Roman boot on us, probably Judaism wouldn't have survived in any form. But the important thing about the Babylonian captivity, that time around from 584 BCE to around 470 or 460 BCE, is we learned how to keep our religion as best we could without the temple, because the temple wasn't there. And this was going to become very important for us later. But more about that later.
Let me just highlight a couple of things. So you start the Jewish religion from Isaac. Comes down, as Greg said, the prayers all begin with remembrance of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As Mati said, his prayers begin with Abraham and come down through the same lineage. The importance, in addition to the history, is keep in mind this temple represented the only place where you could actually connect to God properly in the Jewish religion. And so there was this period when they went to Syria and they couldn't do it, and so they had to deal with that. But you're going to see in the next chapter that it's really important when the Romans destroyed the temple, and how this connects both with Judaism and Christianity. So Mati, why don't you come down the line of Ishmael?
Sure, thank you, Roger. Just to add to the prayers that we offer, so I already mentioned about how Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, the founder of Islam, he would recite prayers of Abraham in the beginning and in the middle. That practice has been incorporated into Salat. It's part and parcel of a Muslim prayer now, which we pray 5 times a day. Every single day, every Muslim is a mandatory prayer that we pray 5 times a day. And in every prayer, these prayers are mentioned, invoking blessings on Prophet and Abraham, and just remembering his legacy of devotion to God and monotheism. Now, coming to how Arabs claim to be the children of Abraham and how the Abrahamic family ended up in Arabia is my discussion that I would like to focus on, and then with a few graphs later on towards the end. First of all, according to Islamic traditions, Abraham was from the progeny of Noah, Prophet Noah, and from his children Shem. That is he existed, according to our traditions, between 2200 and 2100 BCE. That's the time frame. He was born in a place called Ur, modern-day Iraq, and he traveled through Egypt to northern Palestine, and that's where he settled. That is mentioned. He had 3 wives, so this is a little bit different than how a Jewish tradition has it. First was Sarah, obviously, Hagar, and then Keturah is the name of the 3rd wife, which is recording, though not much is known except the fact that she was from Midian, which is northern part of Arabian Peninsula.
We have her too.
Oh, you have her too? Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Perfect. So we're in sync then.
Yeah. She was wild.
Oh, okay.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second. I want everybody to get clear on the lineage from Ishmael down to Muhammad. So would you tell Steve if this is where we're starting with your slides?
We can look at it now, or towards the end I was going to discuss the 2 societies of...
Okay.
of
Sorry.
So then we'll certainly discuss this in detail. But the story of Abraham, how in the first place he got to Arabia or Ishmael. The story goes as follows, that when Ishmael, who was already born at a much later age to Abraham, was an infant or a baby Ishmael, when he was commanded by God to take them to a desert place, a place which did not have any inhabitants, and leave them there. There are also traditions where he did so upon the indication of Sarah, that Sarah felt jealous and she asked him to do that. Either way, the story is that he takes Ishmael and Hagar to a desert, a place where there is no human, there's no water, there's no sustenance whatsoever. He has packed with the baby and the mom a few dates and some water. And then he leaves them in that place, a place called Rebekah. It's a valley called Rebekah. And when he's leaving, Hagar asks Abraham that, why are you doing this to us? Abraham remains quiet. And he may have been emotional or whatever the reason is. It's recorded that twice Hagar asked Abraham that why is he doing this to them, and Abraham remained quiet. And then Hagar said, are you doing this upon the command of your Lord? And he nods, and upon that Hagar says that then our Lord will take care of us. Then Abraham leaves, and Hagar, after water runs out, maybe is crying, and she runs between two hills, little hills. One is called Safa and Marwa. And she goes to the top of the hill to see if she can find any sign of human being or any water or any sort or someone can help her. But she is unable to find that. After doing so 7 times, she goes to one hill and to other hill. After doing so 7 times, then she is revealed through an angel, and as the angel Gabriel, that you should go back to your child and you will see water there. There are other traditions as well that she goes back to the baby and she sees an angel digging in a certain place, and that's the indication that there is something, some sort of water. So either way, she is able to locate the place where there's a spring that is flowing, and she's able to quench her thirst. And soon after, there is a caravan that goes by. It's called Jurhamusaniya. That is a tribe that was passing by, and they asked permission to use the water, and that was a small development or settlement that took place 2,200, about 4,000 years ago. So this is a story of Abraham and Ishmael and how they got settled in that place, the valley of Rebekah, which later on known to be as Medina. So that spring that was discovered by Hagar through revelation was a place where it's called Zamzam. And even to this day, when the pilgrims will go there, these are all part of the rituals. They have to go through the Safa and Marwa, the 2 hills that Hagar went through to commemorate her sacrifice and her devotion. And also there's, to this day, that spring, obviously now they have enlarged it and have used other means to take the water out, but that Zamzam is still there. Now, quickly going through the difference between is, according to the Bible story, Hagar was, Ishmael was 15 years old, or 14 years old when he expelled them. So this is, and then the other thing is the age of Ishmael and the location as well. So the Bible says that they were sent, or they went to a place called Paran, and it was a wilderness. It was a place where it was a desert. So all these indications also contribute. We can discuss these more in some of the other stories that are mentioned in the Quran of Abraham. Is his argument with his father Terah or Azar about God being the only creator of the universe. His dialogue between Nimrod, or Nimrud we call him, he's a Babylonian king and the temple priest, and how he overcame with argument with him. And then his breaking of the idols, being thrown in the fire, his willingness to slaughter his son Ishmael. And I know in the Bible it says Isaac, but now these are the 2 tribes. There are 2 the Arab tribes are divided into two classes. One is Arbe Araba and the other is Arbe Mustariba. The first one are the ancient Arabs, and that is, if you can pull up the slide, slide 2A, or the first slide. The two before that. It should be yes, this one. So this one is these are the tribes named after the founders or the prominent people in the history of Noah. These are the ancient Arabs tribes that still exist. And then the other part, the second class or second type of Arabs are from, if you could go to the next slide, slide 2B. This one, yes. So this one, you can see this is the family of Abraham and Ishmael through him. Adnan was not the son of Ishmael, but from the progeny of of Ishmael. There's someone over here. His name was Kedar. Kedar was the person who was in between Ishmael and Adnan. But these Arabs are also called Adnanite Arabs. And if you go to the second page, please. This person here, Fihr, he is considered to be the founder of the Quraysh. That was the tribe that Prophet Muhammad belonged to. And then one more slide after this. There's one more quickly. Should be slide C, 2C or 2D. There, it's also like a time. It's supposed to be like a family tree or a chart. Okay, yeah, there you go. So this is the immediate family tree of Prophet Muhammad through Ishmael. So just wanted to show this. It's available here. I have some printouts as well, if anybody wants it. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
So this is something that I have always never really understood, how you get from Ishmael to Muhammad. That's 2,500 years. And I think what I'm gathering from what you're saying is all these different Arab tribes were born from that and eventually became Muslims when Muhammad brought the religion to all the different tribes. So it isn't exactly the way the Jewish lineage went, starting with Abraham or just below that with Isaac, and then going down from generation to generation, and the King David and all this, the religion was following it. Here what was going on was the same lineage was taking place, and then it became the Islamic religion in 600 AD, 2,500 years later. So a little more complicated, but the main thing is you can trace down from Ishmael to Muhammad, and that's how we got to the Muslim religion. There's a continuation, which of course starts with Abraham. The second thing that surprised me that they didn't exactly mention, but first of all, that the stories in the Quran are very similar to the Bible stories about the same kind of things, and that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, who did Abraham take up to the mountain at God's will to sacrifice? Greg?
Isaac. Yes.
Isaac. We all the Judeo-Christians say Isaac. Mati, who in the Quran was taken up? Ishmael. Isn't that fascinating? And when I first was involved with some Jewish-Muslim dialogue, and they said, oh, really? Isaac was taken? I have no idea. And the Judeo-Christians have no idea that it was Ishmael. But this is where stories differ, but we're all coming from the same place. Okay, so that's really going to bring us up to the Common Era, to the time of 33 BCE, the birth of Christianity, and eventually the adoption of Christianity by Rome. So take it away, Christians.
Latter-day Saints, you should be so excited with all these pedigree charts, right? We do pedigree charts really well. So I see it. I see it like, oh yeah, yes, ancestry, family tree, do it. Before I turn it over to Mike, also a note, we kind of feel badly because two Christians tag teaming on the others. Sorry. It's kind of modern history, it feels like. When looking at this history, please remember to contextualize. A lot of us, especially from my tradition, we look at where we are now with Christianity or wherever our faith is, and we trace it back and we put it in context. Like, we'll put the Abraham story in context of our faith today, if that makes any sense. And I think you see that as we all have this is how we own Abraham, this is how our faith developed, because we see like messianic projections in Abraham in the life of Jesus Christ, but you have to go back to that time and realize they're not seeing where we are now. They're not seeing a Christian church as it is now, or the thousands of Christian churches that there are now. So when Christianity begins, it isn't Christianity. It isn't a faith or a religion. It is a movement within a culture and a time. Did you want to take off on that? We're total, like I said, tag teaming here. I'm going to defer to the man in the room. Just kidding.
Well, it is easy for us to say Christianity began with Jesus. And it turns out we're learning more and more over the last century or a century and a half that really isn't true. In the first place, the notion of the last judgment, the notion of what happens after you die. If you were a Jew way back, you may have gone to the bosom of Abraham, but there was no mythology of what happens after you die. This comes in after the Greeks slaughtered Jews in what we now celebrate as Hanukkah. We think of the light in the temple, but what was had happened there was that the Greeks had tore the place up, and hundreds of children were killed literally in front of their parents. How can you imagine a child that only got maybe a few years and a just God at the same time? And along those lines, the idea emerges. There must be something elsewhere after death where my child will get something that they were robbed of by being slaughtered. And when Jesus was doing his ministry, one of the things that was at issue amongst several of the groups of Jews of the time was this whole notion of the Last Judgment and of what happens after. Jesus is killed in 33 A.D. It is really not accurate to talk about Christianity until maybe in the middle of the 3rd century or the 4th. Because what happens, I turned it off before. What happens is that there were lots and lots of communities, sometimes called house church communities, all around that spread out from Jerusalem. They spread out into Syria, they spread out into the Roman area, into Greece. And some of these were vaguely Christian, and some of these, though particularly the ones that St. Paul visited, but many of these were also Jewish, and various combinations, because the theology was really, really fluid. And as a result, one of the ways that we know about this multiple batch of communities in that day is that they got to habit of calling each other heretics. You were nobody in that day if you weren't called a heretic by somebody. And if you weren't called up as a heretic by somebody, then the Romans were mad at you for refusing to worship the emperor. The period was really, really fluid religiously. And it was only when we got to the Romans recognizing a small piece of Christianity as the religion of the empire that we begin to see the evolution of what we come to know as Christianity. You want to go from there?
So I would like to note too how we call them house churches. Probably a lot of them felt like they were family get-together potluck community events. I don't even know if they really saw themselves as organizing churches.
Nope.
But they're just getting together and they're having dinner together and they're breaking bread together as Jesus did in the Last Supper. And this, as you know, as these Christian movements start to build in the Greco-Roman Empire and they slowly move away from their connections to the Holy Land, is when they slowly let go of their Jewish connections, because prior they are still going to synagogue, they are still circumcising, they are still doing the Jewish customs, but it seems like there is a cultural shift. Christianity as a movement shifts geographically and culturally away from Holy Land Jewish roots. And then also stepping back when Jesus is alive as well. Jerusalem, Israel in and of itself is in a very tumultuous time with Roman occupation, but there's schisms within the political environment of Judaism, where you've got the Pharisaic movement, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and they're all kind of competing. And of course, as always, politics comes into play, right? Control, alliances with the Romans, who has leadership, who has authority, and you throw Jesus as a figure right into the middle of that, who comes as a leader, somebody who's kind of stepping out of those three boxes. It's funny, I read documents where some are saying, well, he was a Pharisee. He was more of a Pharisee. No, he was more of an Essene. No, we actually don't know where to put him. So we get this new kind of movement that comes. But yeah, it's not a church, as Mike says initially. It's more of different ideas and theologies and even politics within this broader culture that slowly evolves as the culture and the politics evolve. Did I mess anything up that you need to correct?
No, and it is really easy for us to forget that the emergence of Christianity didn't stop at the end of the gospel message. That was only the beginning of what was happening. What happens now again further is that the people in Jerusalem can't get along any better with Rome than they had before. And Rome comes in 130, roughly, AD, and literally destroys the city of Jerusalem, plows it under, passes a rule that anybody who is seen within sight of Jerusalem can be killed. The Romans were not fond of these people in 130 AD. And in the period between 130 AD and 350, the relationship dramatically improves, significantly improves, and we end up with one segment of that era of emerging Christianity, one segment of it becoming the beginning of the Roman Catholic Church. And even they couldn't get along. In around 1000 BC, 1000 AD, they got to squabbling amongst themselves, and you now then ended up with the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Orthodox Church, and they are separate to this day.
Going back to this concept of family, see, we never can get along, can we? We always have these family disputes and fallouts. We got work to do, everybody. Major family counseling.
That's why we're here.
Exactly. This is group therapy. Also, remembering Christians did use the Hebrew Bible, and the New Testament develops over time, slowly, as letters of Paul circulate, different writings. And that really, the Bible as we know it today doesn't exist. You probably have dates, but not in the early church. It's a much later development. Okay.
Okay.
So we want to pick up.
So we're really seeing the early Christians were Jewish people who followed into Christianity primarily. And then I guess it began to spread to other people in the area.
Well, we are going to have the discussion about the sibling relationship, right? Okay, good.
Okay,
All right,
so,
then I'll be
Greg, what was going on with the other group of Jews at this time?
The other group, yes. Okay. Well, yes, it's. I know you know this already, but it's always good to remember that Jesus was a Jew also. And I think among us Jews, we think of Jesus as a nice Jewish boy, very smart, whose principal problem probably was he was born a little too ahead of his time. So he's getting a little too progressive for the Roman boot. But, okay, let's imagine for a minute you're Shlomi Cohen. Okay, you're a high priest, you're a priest in the temple. You had a lot of sacrificial meat last night, a little bit of the wine offering, you're kind of sleeping it off. The alarm rings, you stop the alarm, you get up. You said, time to sacrifice the goats. You said, oh, wait a minute. The temple's destroyed, what do we do now, right? So here we are, we have this full-blown temple cult, an entire religion, an entire message from God that has been completely obviated by the fact that the central commitment to temple sacrifice is now made impossible. You can't create a temple somewhere else, it's got to be there, and that ground was said had been raised. So what do you do? Well, this is where the ingenious Jewish mind started really working into overtime. So we have these laws. We can't just throw out the laws. So what do you do with them? Well, there are two things about laws, generally. The first one is, well, Roger mentioned at the beginning that he's been an attorney for 50 years. Is that right?
55.
See, you couldn't make a living out of doing that if anyone could read a law and knows what it means, right? Basically, you're taking, I hate to go from the Torah to the Internal Revenue Code, but basically it's the same thing, right? You got things you don't really understand written in a funny language, and somehow they're taking all of your wealth away. So yeah, it's basically the same thing. So there needed to be a way to preserve the law, at least in its sanctity through its meaning. So the rabbis got together and put their heads together and decided, how are we going to do this? Well, we can't sacrifice animals any longer. So what was the point of the sacrifice? It was to cleanse our sins and show a commitment to God that we can let go of our personal secular things in order to honor Him and become clean again. So let's use prayer for that. So they came, being in the publishing business, they came up with this huge, this is a typical Jewish siddur. It's a Jewish prayer book. So every day, during the times when the temple was burning animals, we would say one of these services. We have a morning service for the morning sacrifices, we have an afternoon service for the afternoon sacrifices, and an evening one for the evening sacrifices. So we are, as it were, sacrificing our speech or our lips to God instead of that. That's how we do that. Then we have to figure out how we're going to lead normative Jewish law lives when there's no temple. So,
You love the toys.
yeah, I've got a lot of things to say. We come up with the Talmud. I told you, we're in the book business, right? So here we have a typical page of the Talmud, right? Here is the Mishnah. So this is the code of Jewish law that was being devised right around the time that Jesus was meeting his fate, and some of those guys were running away from the nasty Romans. And then a bunch of lawyers down here saying what those words mean. So, I get it. We're not supposed to work on Shabbat. Okay, fine. So what is work exactly? Oh, well, work is one of these 39 things. Well, how do you know that? Well, because here it says this, but no, I think it says this over here. So they have all of these very Jewish lawyer-like disputes right in here. And then as time goes on, that becomes less and less clear. So they have a commentary on that. And then that becomes unclear. So then they have a commentary on the commentary. And then they have all these sites. Yeah, it's fun reading. And this entire book is just about how to run your Passover Seder. This is just one of 76 volumes, okay? So plenty to do as a Jew if you're into that. So to recapitulate, what do the Jews do when their central resources are taken away from them? They find a way to reinvent their religion. We're no longer really Torah Jews. No one wants to say this. but we're not. We're rabbinic Jews. We follow this rabbinical practice. The way I guess we can still say we're Torah Jews is that we follow the Torah absolutely to the extent we can. Because you can't do the impossible. We can't do sacrifices even though the Torah says to do it, because the Torah says to do it at a certain place. If the certain place isn't there, we're following the Torah by not doing it. So see this, I had to get paid for this, this is great lawyering here. So that's what was going on with the Jews at that time.
Okay, so we're talking about this period now. We're really looking at a separation of the Jewish tradition. Those who went towards Jesus and had these beginnings, perhaps not even knowing where they were headed, and then the other group saying, look, the temple's gone, we got to do something. What do? We begin to write everything down. Right. And so now let's move on to what's going on in the Christian world around the time that Rome adopts Christianity, and that changes things dramatically in the Christian world.
Right, Roger, I'm sorry, I just have to say one more thing. As part of a replacement for the temple, especially since there's so many Mormons here, I need to point out that we have a prayer shawl, which may look familiar to some of you here. This is something we wear on the outside, which is not unlike, I believe, a garment that you wear on the inside. We only the Orthodox do that these days, but this is part of our movable temple. Okay.
Thank you. Well, the Christians got along with the Romans to a degree and accompanied the Roman soldiers as they spread out into the Roman Empire. And this is largely where we got Christian communities, how we got Christian communities spread as widely as they were. But there were still those, what were they? They weren't Jewish, they weren't Christian, they were heretics. They were out there in the empire. One of the interesting ones that has recently come to light, by recently I mean 100 years ago, and that is the poor young man was walking along keeping track of his sheep, and he fell in a hole. And he looked around in the hole he fell into, and here were these clay jars. Well, he had busted a few of them, and so there was pieces of papyrus sticking out from corners. And that's a valuable stuff. If you live on the desert, you need stuff to help light the fire. He brought a whole bunch of this stuff home, and his mom started using it to, according to the story, to light the fire, until somebody looked at it and say, wait a minute, those are documents with interesting writing on them. Well, it turned out to be Syriac, and they turned out to be copies of books that the Christians approved of by Rome had declared nobody should have. And so the monastery near Nag Hammadi buried theirs. We have found other documents, other ways around Europe, and it has made us realize that the religious ferment that was going on in those first 300-400 years AD was way more interestingly diverse than we would have been led to believe. Which brings us up to almost up to the point where we begin bumping into these people off the desert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, one more thing to go in with Reverend Mike is that something to take away from this, which you shouldn't not see, is that what Jesus and his fellows were doing during that time was, in a sense, exactly the same enterprise that the other Jews were undertaking at this time. Everyone around that time knew that their religious life was in peril because of an invading, occupying suzerain. So they had to figure out how they were going to go forward. It's just that our families sort of diverged a little bit in how we decided to do it. The Jews being the typical stick in the mud, saying, no, we're not changing a thing, we're just redefining how we're doing it. Whereas Jesus and his followers were saying, let's take a higher road here and see if we can't grab the essence. I won't speak for Christians, but there's a lot more love in the Christian message. The Jews love, that's fine, but what have you given me yesterday, right? But there is a close connection there.
What would you say was the time frame when the Romans actually adopted Christianity? Would you say that's the beginning of the formal Christian religion, and what period are we talking about?
Nicene Creed.
Nicene Creed you have as 327.
Yeah, and the Nicene Creed is part of the reason why I got tried for heresy back when I was a Baptist, because the Nicene Creed contains a whole lot of the stuff that Christianity kept as it moved into and with the Roman Empire, but it also doesn't contain any reference to the fact that Jesus taught anything. The Creed has none of Jesus' teaching, nor even an inference that he had any. And when I was 13 years old, that ticked me off.
Yeah, well, you're 83 now, so you can relax, come back to it.
So another thing to remember, and I think this is true of almost all faiths, once a faith becomes government run or sanctioned, then the structure changes and the nature of the faith itself changes. Yeah. So when Rome recognizes Christianity and you have Constantine as a Christian, then now laws and, religious separation from secular law is such a recent invention, because religious laws and secular laws have always been like this. How do you live as a just moral society? And people in the past did not separate, this is my religious faith and this is my moral compass. It's the same thing. When you have a government recognize a faith and embrace it at theirs, then it becomes the controlling factor and the dominant faith, and it changes. And Christianity definitely changes structurally when it becomes the religion of the Roman Empire. Now it does have a structure. Those loose home churches and these loose gatherings are now, we have authority figures, we have priests. The liturgy gets nailed down to be precise. The Eucharist becomes more of a formal ritualistic thing versus the potluck get-together in the home church. And feminist moment, women get kicked out. So, actually non-feminist moment.
And then, so you have down here 381 CE, that past the Nicene Creed, that's the recognition of Christianity. That's the beginning of the Catholic Church.
The formal recognition of the church. Yeah.
Okay. So now the Christian Church is really the start of the Christian Church. We're at about 400 in the Common Era, and let's talk quickly about what was going on with the Jewish population around that time. The other group, they were having to deal with what? Now they're a smaller group and outsiders in the Roman Empire. So briefly, what was going on with that?
Well, we were basically hunkering down, I think. we didn't have a governmental establishment that was protecting our rights anymore. We were always, at best, guests of a host government, which actually my Muslim brothers were very kind to us, thank you, during that time, or we probably wouldn't have survived then either. But it's funny when I hear you talk about how religion changes when the government takes it over. I was first thinking, well, thank goodness that didn't happen with this. Oh, well, but an essential part of Judaism from its initial concept was that there really wasn't any difference between state and religion, and they didn't really have a word for religion back then. I think it actually wasn't probably until almost Christianity might have been actually the first religion of the Abrahamic faith, because Judaism was just a way of life, or as Woody Allen said, it's a way of eating, right? But it's a way of life, and there was no bifurcating of them. So when they went into the diaspora and were at other people's whims, it's actually the opposite that was the problem. What do you do with your religion when it isn't part of the government? So we did a lot of crypto stuff. And I don't mean coins.
And so you're kind of second-class citizens in a sense, tolerated by
Yes.
the Romans, really seen as the people who were there when Jesus was there, but really no longer part of the government religion, and
We were good as scapegoats, though.
good as, well, that keeps coming.
And
the
dispersed
Jewish
all over the place.
population really started going down and down. Okay, so that brings us up to 570 CE, when the Islamic tradition began. And I think we ought to just take a little 5-10 minute break, get some water, get some food.
Yeah, refill our
and then
glass.
come back and let Mohammed take us to Islam. Okay, so we'll take a little, just a short break. There's some food over here, some water.